You're listening to the Born to Kick Arse podcast with Matt Tomasi and can be found at borntokickarse.com/episode 29.
Welcome to the Born to Kick Arse podcast, where you're introduced to the most fascinating people on the planet. Learn the ingredients of greatness that you can apply to your life. And now your host, Matthew Tomasi.
Today's podcast is brought to you by audible.com. Get a free audiobook of your choice and a 30-day free trial by visiting borntokickarse.com/audible. There's over 180,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle or MP3 player. To download your free audiobook today, go to borntokickarse.com/audible. Again, that's borntokickarse.com/audible for your free audiobook. Mick Thwaites was a former pack-a-day smoker who has battled through alcohol addiction and depression. Mick started to get into running in 2012 at the age of 38, and within the space of 3 years represented Australia at the 24-hour World Championships. Mick talks about his massive 413 kilometres at the Canberra 48-hour, which was a lead-up to his second consecutive Badwater. The Badwater 135 is the most demanding and extreme running race on the planet. It's held in the middle of summer and covers 135 miles from Death Valley to Mount Whitney in California, where temperatures reach 50 degrees Celsius. Mick came third in both 2015 and 2016 and shares his experience of what it was like. Enjoy the interview. Mick Thwaites, welcome to the Born to Kick Arse podcast.
Thanks, Matthew.
Now, you've just come back from Badwater about 6 weeks ago. How's the legs? Have you recovered since then?
Yes, well and truly recovered. I'm actually back into a training block as we speak.
Yeah, Badwater is known as the toughest and probably the most extreme ultramarathon on earth, which I really want to get into. You've podiumed twice. 2015, that was your first year? Was that right? At
yes,
Badwater?
that was right. Yep.
Yeah, so you podiumed, you came third last year, 2015, and this year. That is something I really want to find out more about. But before we get into Badwater and some of the other runs that you've done to date, can you maybe tell us about yourself, where you grew up, and were you always a runner growing up?
No, not really. I emigrated over from the UK in 1999. So I grew up in a place just south of Bristol in the UK called Weston-super-Mare. My father was in the RAF and he moved around quite a bit. At school, I mainly played football. I played a lot of sport, football, cricket, rugby. So I was always a sporty kid. I didn't do too bad, I think, at cross country at school in my younger days. I think when I was about 9 or 10, but running wasn't sort of something that I did. When I left school, I went to join the army. So I did get into a bit of endurance type marching and things with packs on your back during my time in the army, and a bit of cross-country skiing. So I've probably always had a bit of endurance in there somewhere.
Yep.
But running wasn't something I did as a child or as a young adult. It all seemed too hard because I'd probably wake up more times than not on a Saturday or Sunday morning with a hangover.
So how long were you in the army for?
I was in the army for 9 years. 9 years in the British Army.
And did that sort of, with the army training, did that sort of Do you think the mindset and the discipline that you were exposed to in the army, do you think that sort of planted the seeds somewhat for where you are today?
Yeah, looking back, yeah, probably did. I grew up in a pretty disciplined, with my father being in the RAF, in a pretty disciplined house with a lot of respect. So yeah, the army taught me that the mateship and the teamwork. Obviously, now I bring that into my run-ins, especially with some of these events like Badwater, which we'll touch on with the crews and stuff. So, yeah, so I'd say that the army was sort of a great stepping stone for, some mental toughness.
And after the army, your time in the army, when did you actually move out to Australia?
Basically, as soon as I left the army, my parents came out to Australia the year I went into the army, and so they were here, 9 or 10 years, and I came straight out to work with my father, who was in Townsville, and he had a computer business up in Townsville. So I moved out to Townsville for the first 5 or 6 years of my time in Australia, and went to live in nice warm Townsville.
Now, during these years, through I'm guessing your 20s or something, I read just in some other interviews that you've done while preparing for this interview, you were a smoker. Is that true?
Yeah, I was.
Did you sort of party pretty hard? And
yeah, definitely, especially within the army. But I smoked from the age of 13 through to 33. So, 20 years of smoking, and when I was 16, probably through 16 through to 36, 38, yeah, quite a lot of drinking too.
Were you sort of averaging pack a day type thing, or?
Oh, definitely. When I came over to Australia, I probably, with the size of the packs that were here, I was smoking 30 cigarettes a day. In England, it was 20 a day because of the pack. It was 20, but in Australia, as soon as I came, it was 30 a day. Yeah.
Yep. And what about drinking? Were you like a social drinker, or were you into drinking more than socially, or can you maybe tell us about that?
I was growing up in my teens, my 20s. I would say it was a social drinker, but that moved when I came to Australia, and I had some dark times when I was up in Townsville, and maybe some when I came to Brisbane, before I started running, and I was hitting the alcohol pretty hard, and that was my medicine. So I would say, in Townsville, it got to probably an alcoholic type situation where I was looking for a drink every time I walked through the door when I got home from work. So that was quite hard to shake that. I'm not saying I don't drink now. I still enjoy a beer, drink, but it's all in moderation. And I've found a new medication, obviously, which we'll talk about with the running. But so I did some damage to my body, and hopefully it's not going to come back later on in life to haunt me.
What was it the thing that sort of changed your view on, like, cigarettes, for example? Did you just go cold turkey one day, or did you go through the patches or the nicotine gum? How did you sort of get off the cigarettes?
I tried everything to start with, like everyone's done. I tried the patches, I tried cold turkey. It was when my daughter was, she was 2 or 3 years old, and I tried everything, and the thought of her growing up seeing me smoking just really sort of drove home to me the fact that I had to quit. So I actually went to the doctor probably for the second time, and I got onto the tablets. I think the Zyban they were called, and you take them along with your cigarettes for, I think it was 2 to 3 weeks, and whether it's a placebo or not, I don't know, but there's meant to be a chemical reaction with the tablets, the addiction to the nicotine in your brain.
Yeah.
And they give you a date to stop, and you just stop on that day. And since that day, I have not smoked. So I've had one cigar, and that made me sick, and that was at a celebration for something, probably about 3 years ago. But yeah, so since that day, I can honestly say with my hand on my heart, I've not put a cigarette in my mouth. And it's not the fact that I've had cravings. I don't mind the smell of it sometimes if somebody's smoking near me, but I have no inclination whatsoever to put one in my mouth ever again.
Do you think all the running you've done sort of since then has reversed 20 years of smoking? Because you've done some massive runs. I reckon your lungs would be fully cleaned out by then, or by now.
Yeah, I like my lungs are, cleaned out. Hopefully it has been reversed. We don't know. Obviously, cancer's a very nasty beast that maybe is sitting dormant inside us. Who knows? So yeah, I'm hoping that yes, I have undone the damage. I think people say the lungs do repair themselves, and yeah, I've given mine a fair good workout over the last few years. So I'm hoping I've knocked that one on the head.
So when you're in Townsville, what sort of age were you then?
When would that be?
And did you sort of get into running, or how did you actually get into not only running but ultra running? Was there like a progression, or how did that the exposure, how did that sort of kick off?
That only kicked off in 2012, so we're only talking 4.5 years ago now. I was actually down in Brisbane. So I've been in Brisbane now for, I think, about 8 or 9 years we've been here. But in Townsville, I used to play football when I came over, and that was sort of kept me fit. And funnily enough, I had really bad knees. So I actually stopped playing football when I left Townsville and came down to Brisbane. And it did nothing for a few years and just ate and drank and worked and put on a few pounds. And at one stage, I think, when I started running, I started just as a jog to go out and get fit to try and lose some weight. I think it was the same as the smoking. Because I was drinking, I wanted to try and do some fitness so I could drink and eat and not get any bigger, basically. I was weighing 87, 88 kilos. And I wasn't sort of happy with where I was at with my body. I just went out and did a 15-minute, 20-minute run. And the rest is history. Shall we say the rest is just progressed from there. So
you started to, want to, or you identified that you wanted to make a bit of a change, and, you started doing sort of regular jogging. Was there a point where, going for sort of half-hour runs or sort of 5K runs, every now and then, how did you then progress after that? Did you register for any marathons or half marathons, or did you do any sort of fun runs at all around that time, or did you just, go straight into the deep end?
No, it was the beginning of 2012, so I registered for the half marathon. I'm trying to think. It was a half marathon in Brisbane that I registered for in the Twilight half marathon, which I registered for. That was in March. So I went and ran that. That was my first half marathon, and I can remember. I can't remember the time. I think I did an hour 45 or an hour 50 or something for that. And I remember sitting on the grass at the UQ University, really chuffing myself, eating a muffin. And after running 21 Ks, I remember stopping in McDonald's on the way home to have a burger and a milkshake, which I then saw in the toilet about half an hour later. Yeah. So from there, that gave me a bit of a buzz, a bit of an adrenaline, obviously, a bit of an adrenaline rush. And then that year, I went on and just registered I did this Gold Coast Marathon with a friend, and Toowoomba Marathon, Sunshine Coast Marathon, and my first 100K. So yeah, it was just bang, 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 one after another.
So it were those marathons, were they sort of in a close time frame? Were they sort of fairly close to each other, those marathons that you did?
Yeah, it would be. So July, August, October, July, August, and then I did the Glasshouse 100K in September, and then the Toowoomba Marathon again in October. So like month, yeah.
So pretty much at this point in your life, you've been bitten by the running bug. You've successfully done a marathon, and, for those people who have completed a marathon, it's an incredible achievement, especially, when you start to hit the wall at, mid-30s and, you've got that sort of little bit left, you really got to dig deep. And did you sort of find at that point that you'd really been bitten by that running bug?
Yeah, because when I started running further, let's say training for the marathons, I was using the running and the distance to think. I don't know, it was my way to think about work, think about family life. Any problems or issues I had, I would use the runs to sort that out. So I didn't bring the problems home with me or dwell on them while I was at home. So for me, when I first started doing these long runs and even in these races, I used my mind to run through daily activities, daily work stuff, daily problems with life, things I had to do, and suddenly the time would fly by. Now it's a bit different because of, obviously, sometimes when pushing the envelope in some of these races, your mind has to concentrate on exactly what you're doing at the moment, in that moment, at the time. So, yeah, it's a challenge. I think it's a challenge, the mindfulness challenge as well as the physical challenge.
You mentioned you did you did a handful of marathons, and then you decided to step up to the 100K. So that was your first ultra?
I'm trying to think memories. I know I did a 50K Glasshouse as well, so I'm trying to think if that was in the mix around the marathons. I can't go. Might have to go back through my records, but I'm sure I did I did a 50 before the 100. In that space of time too. So I was basically, I wasn't training too much. I was nearly racing every other, not racing, but doing an event every other weekend. But yeah, 50K would have been my first ultra, and then I stepped up to the 100.
And how did you actually, was there any sort of hesitation when you enrolled for that first 100K, or was it, no, I'm straight in, where's the paperwork, I'll sign it, I'm in? Or was there any sort of self-doubt, taking that next step up, from 50K, from marathon 50Ks up to the 100K?
Oh, definitely. I didn't have a doubt I wouldn't finish, but I probably had a doubt I wouldn't justify or satisfy like my own goals. So I'd done like a lot of people. I'd read quite a few books. Was it Born to Run and all those other books, like Dean Karnazazi's book. So I'd read quite a lot of books, and I got that mental preparation from reading about other ultra runners. But yeah, I had obviously trepidation whether I could turn that into like a successful sort of race for myself. I didn't really want to go into something like that and have to walk 60 kilometers of it or 50 kilometers of it. I wanted to basically try and run the whole thing and satisfy my own goals.
Now, after that 100K, you've done some other incredible races. Tell us about you've done a number of track races as well. You mentioned a 24-hour run just before we started the interview. Can you tell us about that? Where was that? Was that like in Turin?
Yeah, that was the World Championships, the 24-hour World Championships, which was March last year. So I got into, after doing a few 100-milers, I decided I'd like to have a go at the sort of the next level up, and that was 24-hour racing. So in 2014, I've set about to try and get a qualifier to get into the Australian national 24-hour team, and that qualifying distance at that stage to get in the team was around about 234 kilometres or 35 kilometres in 24 hours. So I went to Adelaide. In the June or July, and my first 24. I'm sorry, my second 24, and I managed to do 226 kilometres, I think it was. So that was shy of the qualification, but that was my first real foray into 24-hour running. And then later that year, I went to New Zealand and to Auckland, and went on the track, and that was at Mount Smart Stadium, and I managed to get 230, I think it was 234 kilometres there, which qualified me for the Australian team to go to Turin in 2015. So yeah, we went there as a team of male and female team, and we had 6 runners in each team, against all the world's top ultra runners. And yeah, it was a 2 kilometre circuit, just outside the stadium in Turin.
With the track running, do you continually go around in one direction, or do you alternate directions, sort of like clockwise for a period of time and then go anti-clockwise? Do they mix it up, or is it just continually one direction the whole time?
Nah, when we race on a track, normally every 3 hours or every 4 hours you'll change direction. So so you don't load one side of the body up for the whole 24 hours. In Turin though, because of the amount of competitors in the race, and it was a 2 kilometre circuit, it was only, I think, it was a 300-metre section on the track as you came into the stadium. We did that in one direction for the whole 24 hours. Because it was on paved pathways and like roads, that one direction didn't matter too much.
Now, I sort of want to move on a little bit towards, or leading in towards Badwater. With Badwater, I know, can you tell us about the selection criteria? Can anyone off the street just register for the Badwater 135 and get in and get to the start line, or is there some sort of selection criteria required to be accepted to run Badwater?
Yeah, like a lot of the 100-mile races or the big events, Badwater has a selection process, basically, where you have to submit a CV of your running achievements or your the races that you've completed. So I can't remember off the top of my head, but there is a minimum criteria of so many 100-mile races, or a distance in a 24-hour race that's a minimum to submit the application, and then from there the race director goes through and selects on experience and merit. They may not look at someone who's just started and done 200 milers in 1 year. They look back at a track record over quite a few years to see times and distances. And also with Badwater, there's only been 100. There's only 100 places, and so they give so many places back to returning veterans, they call them, and rookies. So they split the field up between veterans and rookies. And I think also, as probably any race director would say if it's not a lottery, they'd pick. Well, not hand. I wouldn't say hand pick as such, but they would pick to make sure they covered a broad spectrum of runners of all ages and abilities, rather than just an elitist field or a field where somebody won't push a record or won't finish. So I think the way Badwater is done is the race director they want everyone to finish. They're not picking it to say only 50% finish, this race is so hard. So it's a justification for the people that start, that when there's such a low attrition rate in a race like Badwater.
Now, before we get into Badwater, there's one other event that I want to find out a bit more about, which I'm guessing would have added to your resume to get you, guarantee you a spot into this year's Badwater. In Canberra, earlier this year in 2016, there was a 48-hour track race. Was that your first 48-hour?
Yes, yeah, it was.
Can you tell, how do you approach mentally, how do you go into, having your mindset ready for like 24 hours, like I've run for 24 hours and I know what that's like, but 48 hours, how do you approach that mentally? Did you sleep at all, or do you just try and push through for that 48 hours?
Yeah, well, being my first 48, it was going into the unknown. I know I've been awake for 24 plus before, so I knew I could go probably at least to 30 hours without sleep, but you don't know what the body's going to do. I actually slept for 8 minutes in the whole 48 hours. I didn't have a planned time to go to sleep, but I always had a planned rest where I could. I thought I'd try and get down for half an hour and at least try and have a 30-minute sleep. But my mental approach to Canberra was a bit different to what I maybe did or would do for other types of races and Badwater, for example. I do a fair bit of meditation and get my mind in the right space. And I had a mantra which I use quite a bit now, and I used it at Canberra to pretty good success, was to just run happy and just be in the moment. And it worked. And if you ask anybody that was there, 90% of the time I had a smile on my face, and it wasn't painted on. I was happy. I was enjoying it. I was in the moment, and time just flies. It's it was all the preparation and getting the mindset right is probably 80% of the battle.
So you actually went in to this race, the 48-hour, with the mindset, or with having that mantra in your mind of run happy?
Yeah, definitely. Just be happy and smile and be thankful, like, because with crews there and the volunteers, and by saying thank you to people and saying hello and trying to have small conversations or just a smile as you went past, that just kept my mind happy. And with my crew, thanking them all the time, talking to them, making sure they were all right, just those different things, rather like focusing on the positive and not the negative. So I just found doing that in daily life too, that helps. So if you're training your mind to focus on the here and the now and what you can control, then you can take that into your running, and especially with something like a 48 where you're just running around in circles, as people think you might go mad. But if your mindset is on the positive and you're not dwelling on aches and pains and negative issues, then yeah, you can get into that happy place and just keep ticking along.
Yeah. With the food on the 48-hour track race, was the aid station sort of just like at the start-finish line or sort of located at, on the track somewhere?
Yeah, well, they have a setup because we have a crew, so we can have people crew us. So along the home straight, we had I had a gazebo set up. Most runners in the 48 all had a gazebo set up with their crew in there, so that you have a table with your nutrition on there, and your crew are able to pass you your nutrition drinks as you come past, or you can step off and get it. You can only get it in one spot on the track. They can't run around with you. So every lap, you can always get something, and I'm quite fortunate. I had 4 or 5 people to crew over the weekend for me, so they got a bit of rest too. And most people in an event like that, it's another team. It's like Badwater with the crews that follow you along at Badwater in a 24 or 48. You rely on that crew, so it's not just about you running out there. It's about the crew as well. And if you've got a good crew there, there's another battle that you have to fight yourself, and they can help you mentally, physically, push through things.
On this race, what was it like mentally when you passed the 300 kilometre mark? How satisfying was that? Or did you notice that sort of milestone, the 300k mark?
No, not really. Funny you should say. I was just thinking that when you said it. No, I didn't. The 200, when I got to 250, I know that because my PB, my furthest I've ever run was 247. That was at the World Championships in the 24 last year. So when I ran 248 in the 24, that was in that was in my mindset. So we had a bit of a celebration as I came around. That's the furthest I'd ever run in one go. So 300 was a bit of a blur, I think. 400 was the big one when I went through 400, because that was a target goal in my mind, in the back of my mind, to click over that 400, and the rest after that was really just a bonus. But the 400 I'd say was the main one.
So at the end of the 48 hours, how far did you end up running?
413. Yeah, just over.
Now, what does that do to you? Like afterwards, like you've crossed the finish line, and then you let's just say you fast forward a bit, and you've packed up and you've gone home, and you over the next several weeks, what does that sort of do to you, knowing that you've completed running 413 kilometres? Is the rest find that the rest of the stuff that you do in life is just easy? Do you know what I mean? Like, you've suffered that much that 413, it just, all the other stuff in life, all the little things that, that life throws at you, do you just find that is just like a little mosquito you can just flick away, knowing that, you've climbed that mountain of 413 Ks?
Yeah, it's hard actually. It's a bit surreal. I don't think it's still sunk in. It's still sunk in now. I try.
What did your workmates say? Could they believe it? Like 413?
Yeah, they just think I'm crazy. A lot of people can't believe it. I probably still can't believe it as such, but it's hard if I know there's more there as well. So I know I can go further. So that's another thing that sits in there. It's not the limit. There's more to come. So you've got that in the back of your mind. I know I can deal with I can deal with anything that comes to me. I pretty much know that in daily and work life, but I try and keep the same mantra going for work and family too. And same with the running. I read in one of the books. I read some of the books on Buddhism, and like one of the mantras or one of the quotes in there it says something like, if you give 100% attention to your task for 100% of the time, you can do no wrong. So it's just being focused. Like if you stay focused on the here and now and give that 100% of your attention, then you can't do anything else. You can't do anything wrong. Well, not say wrong, but you're giving it everything you've got. So
now I want to move on to the big one, the Badwater 135. Tell us about Badwater. G'day guys, Matt here. This podcast is a labour of love, and all episodes are researched, scheduled, edited, created and promoted in my spare time. Typically, after an episode has been recorded, it can take another 3 hours of post-production activities to get the final cut. If I'm providing you with value and you wish to support my vision of sharing these inspirational stories to the world, you can do so at borntokickarse.com and click on the Patreon banner. Your support will help to maintain the monthly podcast running costs and enable me to outsource repetitive tasks so I can bring you even more kick-ass episodes. Once again, if you want to support me in producing this podcast, head over to borntokickarse.com and click on the Patreon banner. You can't miss it. And now back to the rest of the show. I'm guessing a lot of listeners to this podcast would know what Badwater is, but for those who don't know what Badwater is or they've never heard of Badwater, what is Badwater?
Well, Badwater is a 135-mile race from the lowest point in America to the highest, the start of the portal to the highest point in America on the lower 48 states. And it's run in Death Valley, which is also the hottest place in the world, and it's run in the middle of summer. So the temperatures, I think the highest recorded temperature is 50-something degrees in Badwater.
And that's Celsius?
That's Celsius, yeah. So I think it was 54 degrees, the highest record, I can't remember. And that's in the Badwater Basin. So Badwater Basin is like 85 metres below sea level. And then you run to the Mount Whitney portal, which is 2,500 metres, so which is actually higher than Mount Kosciuszko. And on the way there, you basically climb through 2 mountain ranges as well. So it's got 5,500 metres of elevation in the race as well. So some people think Badwater's flat because all you see is pictures of the road and the heat haze. But yeah, there's 2 or 3 big climbs in Badwater. Some people call it, and they call it the toughest race on the planet. It's one of the toughest races. Every race is tough, I think. So it's pretty hard to give it the title of the toughest, the hardest race on the planet when there's so many out there these days. But for its conditions and been on the road in 40 odd degree temperatures with the heat coming off the road too, it's one for the ages, and yeah, it's in quite a few. Obviously, there's been quite a few stories written about it.
Now, with your training for Badwater, like you've done it twice, 2015 where you came third, and also this year where you came third, incredible effort. With your training, you've submitted your application and they've given you, yep, you're in, you've been accepted to Badwater. How do you approach your training for Badwater? I know you aside from logging heaps of miles, tell us about the heat training. How do you prepare for the heat?
Yeah, well, my first year, obviously, it was an unknown to me, so I did a bit of research into the heat training and what people have done in the past for Badwater, and a lot of people, saunas were the go-to for people who weren't living in a climate that they could train in, ready for Badwater. And unfortunately for us, like the lead into Badwater being in July, we're going through the middle of winter. So you actually find out, I think it's February. In February, I found out that I was in Badwater. This is the first one in 2015. So I had nearly 4 months to prepare. I didn't really start heat training till, I would say, 6 weeks before the race, because a lot of the research I carried out, it said that it's actually more detrimental to your training to try and train in a heated environment, like early in the piece. You can lose any effects quite close to the race if you start too early. Plus, your training would suffer too, because you couldn't actually put in the good hard miles and do heat training at the same time, because you would just basically kill yourself. So I just started going to the sauna for 20 minutes, half an hour, a couple of times a week. And then I had an idea of I needed to try and run somewhere that was warm, and being 7 or 8 degrees in Brisbane, that wasn't really going to happen. So initially I had an idea of getting a shipping container, and I was going to get a shipping container, put a treadmill inside that, and stack it full of heaters and try and get a temperature up to somewhere around the Badwater temperature that I could go and do some training in.
So, did you actually do that with the shipping container?
No, well, I've got a precast concrete business here in Brisbane, so I actually decided to build a shed out of concrete. So we made some concrete panels and a floor and a roof, and I assembled it down inside our warehouse, in the bottom corner of our warehouse. Put a roller door on it, so it's basically like a shipping container, or a concrete bunker, shall we say, and put a treadmill in there, put half a dozen heaters in there, a temperature gauge, and basically started slowly walking on the treadmill in there with the temperature in high 30s, and had it cranked up over a 4-week period. I got it up to 47, 48 degrees in the chamber, and knocked out some sessions on the treadmill.
How beneficial was building this concrete sauna or concrete chamber? I'm guessing that paid off big time on the day.
Oh, I think so. I think so. It's hard to see with nothing to compare it against, but I could safely say I prepared as good as I could for the heat, because when we started the race in 2015, the temperature at the start, it was 11 o'clock at night start, was 38 degrees. And when we went through the Panamint Valley the next midday, the next day, it got up to 47. So, I couldn't. The longest session I ever did was 90 minutes on the treadmill. But I would say if I hadn't have done that, the heat over there would have affected me quite a bit that first year.
With the actual training in that chamber, were you wearing just your normal running gear, or were you in a tracksuit at all, or did you sort of cover yourself up with extra layers of clothing to sort of boost the heat, or was the heaters enough?
Yeah, the heaters were enough because the temperature was pretty much what it was going to be over in Badwater, and the humidity in the room was low as well. So because the heat over in Badwater is like an oven, it's like a furnace. It's not like if we have a 38-degree temperature day here where with 80% humidity over there, it's very dry heat. So I felt no need to like go above and beyond and try and run with the tracksuit. Actually, I did run with the race gear that I would be wearing, so I could also work on my sweat rate, and that was another thing that's important, especially for running in Badwater. And we did a bit of work on my sweat rate over an hour at certain temperatures to see how much fluid I was losing and how much I'd have to replace and what your body can take in an hour, for example. So that was another important like, training tool to have, a control to be able to monitor that over a couple of weeks.
Also, with the training of your fluid intake, were you trying to dial in, your electrolytes as well? Yeah, can you tell us about that, the electrolytes, trying to get that part of your training sorted? Or how much electrolytes were you sort of taking with your fluids?
Well, I'm quite lucky that the guys at Shot Sports Nutrition, Daryl Griffiths, he worked with me just before Italy in 2015, and then we worked together coming into Badwater, and I did a proper sweat rate test where we monitored how much sweat fluid I lost in an hour, and then also how much sodium was in my sweat. So I knew on the physics side of things how much sodium I lost per liter of sweat. So having that scientific knowledge there, we were able to replace or get as close to my sodium loss as you physically can. You can't replace it all. You can't replace all the fluid. For example, if I lost 2.5 liters of fluid in an hour, which is 2.5 kilos, it's really hard to try and drink 2.5 liters of water in an hour, or fluids and electrolytes in an hour while you're running. So you've got to get as close to your losses as you can without upsetting the system. So I was quite fortunate that we worked leading into Badwater with different temperatures and different sweat rate losses. So I could pretty much keep on top of that and program that into my race plan for when I got to Badwater.
Yeah, that's interesting. 2.5 litres per hour. It's heaps.
Mm.
Did you do any training with a full tracksuit going for runs around your suburb?
Yeah, definitely.
During the day?
Yeah.
Did we getting sort of weird looks? Or?
Yeah. Double layers, hoods, tracksuits. I do a lot of my training first thing in the morning though, because obviously with a full-time work, and I'm at work by 7 and home at 6, so my training normally starts at 4 o'clock in the morning. So not many people see me out anyway, so it's pretty dark normally. But yeah, same day. And same with this year. Every run I did with at least three or four layers on. Sometimes it's easier to do it with maybe a merino layer and a lycra layer, and then just a wind jacket, because you can keep all the heat inside. You don't need to bulk up with big tracksuits and stuff like that. But especially with all the new clothes and equipment, running clothes and stuff that's around these days.
Now with Badwater, I've heard you need to run down the white line because your shoes can melt. Is that true?
Yeah, it can be. My shoes did melt a bit in 2015. They're pretty soft soled ones, and yeah, we looked at them after the race. I probably should have changed them after 100 miles because they were actually trashed.
Yeah.
The heat coming off the road is pretty ridiculous. I think the white line's pretty warm as well. The white line just gives you something to focus on.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's not a fallacy that your shoes do melt. This year I didn't seem to have as much damage, but not saying it wasn't as hot. But I did have a different pair of shoes on. But yeah, I like to stick on the white line. Just for the mental aspect too, and changing things up with your running gait.
Paint a picture of the start line. So you mentioned your wave, which would be the fastest wave. What time did you start? Was it 11 p.m.?
Yeah, 11 p.m. at night. Yep.
Like the slower waves, do they start before you?
Yeah, there's 8, 9:30, and then 11. So there's three waves of roughly 30 odd people in each wave.
And what's it like standing at the start line of the wave you're in? You know, you're looking around, and how many people are in that wave, roughly?
Yeah, about 30, 35 people in the wave.
So that particular wave, you've got the toughest, most hardcore ultra runners and athletes on earth. What's it like when you're there? You know, the gun hasn't gone off yet, but you're just looking around, and you know that you are going to basically be running uphill for the next 217 kilometres. What's that like?
Oh, just magic. Just from the first year, I couldn't believe I was there, and the second year I couldn't believe I was back, and I was fortunate enough to be standing amongst some of the best ultra runners there in the world, guys that I've followed, and then guys that I've met last year as well. There was a lot of returning runners this year that basically they call it the Badwater family, and it was good to know that you were a little part of that, and just the excitement after being fortunate enough to do it in 2015. I knew what was coming up. So it's like the scenery and just the course. Like, I know it's on the road, but it's just spectacular. When the sun comes up, it's a sight to behold. I actually drove the course back in 2015 because I obviously saw it one way and couldn't believe that drive back. It was So I was just excited about seeing what I saw the year before. So it was the race sort of. Yes, I had goals and I had splits and paces, but I was just looking forward to the experience again.
At the actual Badwater Basin, which is 85 metres below sea level or 280 feet below sea level, is there anything there? Is there some sort of like a pole or some sort of monument to sort of indicate that this is the lowest point in the Western Hemisphere? Yeah,
there's a little boardwalk down there, and there's a wooden post, basically a wooden marker that's got Badwater Basin and the elevation on there. It's pretty famous for. It's where we start. Like, you start from basically behind that board, and like throughout the day, it's like one of the biggest tourist attractions in the Death Valley National Park. So it's pretty busy, and people, they're getting photos next to it like daily. And it's just a big salt basin, big salt pan. But there's a small area, where they've got a timber boardwalk and the sign. And then also there is some hills surrounding it, or just some rock faces. And on that, they've actually got the sea level sign. So when you're standing down in Badwater Basin, you look up at this little rock face, and there's a sign up there set into the rocks. It's sea level, so that's quite good to see, which is 85 meters up in the air. It's good to see.
Is there any vegetation at that there in the Badwater Basin, or is it just sort of salt flats and rocks?
Yeah, basically. There might be the odd little cactus plants because they've had some rain in the last 6 months or so they had a little bit of growth. But there's not much vegetation at all.
Now, tell us your approach how did you approach this? You start at night, 11 p.m. Was your plan of attack to go out hard during the night section and try and conserve through the day? Or what was your sort of strategy, for this race?
I had just a pretty steady approach for this year. The year before, in 2015, I was pretty well prepared, but I struggled a bit from the 50k to the 100k mark, where my body, for some reason, just shut down on me. My legs wouldn't move. I was fine. I wasn't tired, but it was like my body had gone to sleep. The time clock had switched off for 4 or 5 hours. So I was a bit worried that this might happen this year. I didn't know whether it was because of jet lag or time zones or starting at 11 o'clock. So this year, I planned to go out and try and use the cooler temperature at night and just go steady for the first 50, 60 kilometers. But it was actually really windy this year. It was actually, I can't remember what the speed of the wind was, but it was a howling hot breeze at the start, but it was nearly a tailwind. So I used the wind to my advantage to try and make a little bit time up over the first section while we had this breeze behind us.
With your crew, Team Schmick, how did you plan for, refueling? Was there a plan in regards to that? Would they sort of drive off 10 k's down the road and you'd catch up? How was that? How did you sort of plan that? Or are there sort of designated spots where the crew can park?
Yeah, on the course there is some designated spots where they have to stop because they're on hills. Because there's some hills and mountain ranges that it's too dangerous to just pull over on the side of the road. But they like to have in the race. It's the sort of minimum stopping distance is every 2 miles, and that's what we work to. So every 2 miles, just over 3k, the team would pull up at the side of the road, and then they would hand me either a drink or some nutrition or a spray down with cold water or ice. So basically, they kept busy for the whole 200 kilometers. They were stopping nearly every 3 kilometers to give me some kind of a service.
And how many were in your crew?
There was 4. I had 4 in the crew. One of the guys was unfortunately Rob. He was injured, so he was basically he's my crew chief. So he ran the show and made sure I was getting everything from our plan that we meticulously put into place for the month or so before the race. So he drove for the whole 24 hours, and then the other 3 guys were there to pass me nutrition, and also later on in the race they're able to come and pace. So one of them's allowed to join you to pace behind you.
Now, when you're actually running, do you run light, or do you have like a handheld bottle with water with fluids in it, or do you just sort of run light and rely on your crew for fluids and nutrition?
Yeah, well, I always carry one bottle with me. I use it's like a handheld, but it's like I don't know if you've seen it. It's like it's called a simple bottle, where it actually fits into your into the back of your shorts. So it carries like 350 mil. So they would hand one of those to me, or two of those to me, and I could just slip them in the back of my shorts, because it's all right having the handheld, but I like to run light and have nothing in my hands if possible. And that.
What are they called? What was the bottle called?
Simple hydration bottle. Yeah, so they're very handy. So because you don't have to carry them, and they just fit nicely in the back of your shorts, or if you've got a belt on, a spy belt or something like that, you can just slot it inside there. But the crew, if you have a pacer, they were allowed to carry a handheld or extra water if you needed it.
Did your crew, are they from Australia or?
Yes, yeah. All the guys on the crew this year were from Australia. Two of my mates, Marty and Gavin, from up at they're in Rockhampton, and Shane, he's actually from Tasmania, but his girlfriend lives over in the US. So he'd been over there for 2 or 3 weeks before the race, and he was there last year as well. So yeah, the crew in 2015 were we had Australians and one of my mates from New Zealand, and then this year they were all Australian.
Tell us about your gear, clothing wise. Did you wear sort of mainly white gear to sort of aid in cooling?
It was light. It was actually a light green coloured singlet, and I think the boys, they all had light green coloured t-shirts too. So that was twofold. One, because white gets pretty dirty and crappy after a while, and two, it was good to have the light green on, because we're running on the side of the road and the traffic's coming at 50 miles an hour. I did it more as a safety thing, and to run in like a high vis green colour. You see a lot of people wear white just for the heat reflection. It's pretty obviously a smart idea to run in a light colour. Some people take their shirts off, but obviously with that amount of sun out there, that it doesn't take long before you start getting burnt.
With just on the burnt side of things, do you wear sunscreen? Because I know sunscreen can sometimes be a bit of a detriment, because it can clog up your pores. It can sort of inhibit your sweating. Did you sort of apply sunscreen at all, or did you just go the full the full arm and full leg sort of covering?
I had arm sleeves, white arm sleeves, which I put them over, so I didn't have to put too much sunscreen on. Sunscreen mainly went on my legs, because I went into Badwater this year with a beard, and also because we're wearing like a Legionnaires type hat during the race. With the Legionnaires type hat and a beard, there wasn't much sun that was going to get onto my face, so I actually kept the beard so I didn't have to put sunscreen on my face. So really, it was just the legs that we had to look after. And I've, in experience in the past, I did a race called C2K, Coast to Kosciuszko, a few years ago, where my legs got really burnt, and so I learned from the fact that the pain I went through and the swelling I went through because of burnt sort of knees, that you've got to try and just look after those legs. So my legs were exposed, but the boys put sunscreen on every probably 3 hours.
When did, like for 2015, for example, when did the race really start for you? Was it sort of mid-morning, or was there a particular time that you sort of remember where, this is it, you're really knuckling down, if you like?
Yeah, well,
was there a particular?
Yeah, like I said before, I had that weird moment at about the marathon mark, 40k through to 90, where I just couldn't get anything out of my body. My heart rate was really low, but my legs just wouldn't turn over. And then we were coming to the top of the climb, and then I went in. I think I changed my clothes, and there's a long downhill section, about 9 or 10 miles downhill. And as I peaked the top of the hill, I started picking back up again, and I basically I dropped. The guys decided that I was going too fast and that they didn't need to pace me for a while, so they jumped in the car on the downhill section. And for some reason, I went from doing 7-minute Ks down to 4-minute Ks. And then, and that sort of kickstarted the body and kickstarted the brain into sort of being back into the race as such. And then I just spent the next few hours passing people. And it's hard to know where you're at because of the 3 different waves and who's where and what. Not that I was focusing on where I was in the field, but obviously I knew I was sort of back in the mix, and I just had to push on that last 100 Ks.
Are there points on the course where it's just like, I've seen some photos online of parts of the course. Are there parts where the road literally is just a straight long road that extends to the horizon? Just off into the distance.
Yeah, there's two memorable sections, and one of them is basically the top of that first climb I was just talking about. As you start coming down, you can see the climb. You can see the road winds down into, it's called Panamint Valley, and then you look through the valley and look up the other side, and you can see it climbs back up the climb, which is called Father Crowley's Climb, and that distance is about I think it's 20-something miles. You can see, so you can see where you've got to go, the valley you've got to run through, and then the hill on the other side that you can go back up. It's just spectacular. Sorry, last year it was daunting. This year I was looking forward to seeing it again. I'd programmed my mind to go. That it was amazing. It's an amazing view. Last year I looked at it and went, oh God. And then this year I looked at it and I just soaked it in. I couldn't wait to get to that point where I could see that road. And and there's sections where there's straight sections when you can probably see 5 or 6 miles in front of you down the road. But that's what makes the race, I think.
I've heard stories where people's kidneys fail, particularly on Badwater, and when they go to the toilet, it's like coffee. Was that something you were aware, tuning into in terms of keeping your hydration up and your fluids up to ensure that you do go and piss, at some point, and, you're monitoring the colour of your urine?
Oh, definitely, yeah. I've probably dialed that in now over the few years. That actually happened to me on that 24-hour in New Zealand I was talking about earlier, and it's a scary moment. I've read so much about the kidney failure and what can happen during the middle of the races. And 16 hours into that 24-hour, I went to the toilet. And like you said, it was like coffee coming out, and I was like, oh no, I'm 16 hours in, I've got 8 hours to do, I'm doing really well, what am I going to do? And I can remember talking to medical staff there and trying to drink more, and in the end I controlled it and got through without any damage. But since then, like with doing like lots more training, research, and doing these sweat tests, it's taught me a fair bit about hydration and nutrition, and I haven't been back down that path since. So it's definitely something to monitor. But if you get it right, you should really have nothing to worry about.
Whereabouts on the course was your lowest point mentally?
This year or last? This year?
Oh, Annie, was there a particular moment that you really remembered that sticks out in your mind that you're just questioning yourself why you're out there and really battling those demons of whether should I pull out? Why am I doing this? This is stupid. Was there a particular time that you can sort of recall those particular thoughts?
I had in the first 3 or 4 hours of this race, I had a bit of a stomach issue, and I'd gone to the toilet like 3 or 4 times in the first 4 hours, whereas normally in 24 hours, I wouldn't go for a number 2. I get through a 24-hour race pretty much without having to go to the toilet, whereas at Badwater last year I had a bit of a stomach issue at the start, and I think it's more to do with the heat and like just adapting with that breeze in your mouth and trying to take nutrition and food on. But this year it was actually worse. So after probably the 4th time, and we have to poo in a bag as well, which is one of the Badwater race rules. You have to carry what they call biffy bags with you, because you're not allowed, because it's a national park, you're not allowed just to pull over the side of the road and just go behind a bush. Well, there isn't any bushes. So they make you go in a bag. So it's like a big plastic bag. So yeah. That's not much fun sitting on the side of the road, like taking a crap in a bag. So after the 4th time I'd been in the first 3 or 4 hours, I was questioning my stomach, and I was questioning my head, going, well, am I going to finish this? Is this stomach thing going to knock me out? So I was a little bit worried more than anything. So yeah, I was a bit down on myself because of that, but I knew it was a long race and I had a long way to go. So I sort of persevered. And when I got into the first hill climb, which is about 20 odd kilometres long, and there's a fair bit of power walking in that, my stomach and body settled down, and I was walking past people that were running up the hill. So that sort of buoyed me back up to like a confident spot again. And then later on in the race, it probably was about the 100-mile mark. There'd been a fair battle between quite a few of us throughout the day, and I got to I think I was just after the 100-mile mark, and I'd just been passed by Harvey Lewis, the American runner, he came second. And it's a long 40 to 50 kilometre stretch into the Lone Pine village, and there's not much out there. It was getting warm in the afternoon. I started going through a few dizzy spells, and my pace started really slowing. And I can remember at one stage, I was running along and I just had to stop. I was running, it might have been 5-minute 30, 6-minute Ks. I was running along and then I just stopped on the spot and just went all dizzy. And yeah, it was a moment. I was like, what's going on here? Am I going to get through this next 60K? But with a bit of a pit stop and I think a bit of a sugar injection. I think my blood sugar was a bit low. I managed to get back out on the road and get going again.
Can you describe the last part of the course? How much of a climb is it? Is it, when you get through sort of the traditional desert part, if you like, the last bit to the finish line, is it just a steep switchbacks climbing this mountain, Mount Whitney?
Yeah, it's on the road again because it's the road up to the portal. So you basically climb, I think it's 1,000, 1,200 metres in, I think it's 12K, 70K or something like that. So yeah, I'd say it's a grind more than anything. There's not many there's not many switchbacks, but with 200 kilometres in your legs, it feels like. But there's sections on there that, if you're working percentage of climbs, there's section on there that's 25% in gradient, but they're only short.
Jeez, that'd be fun.
Yeah, it's not very runnable. Even though Harvey managed to run a fair bit of that up the thing, which is just awesome to be able to run and just tick along a little bit of a run at that stage. I had nothing in my legs to be able to run any of that. But yeah, so it would vary from 6-7% up to the 20%. The 20% in gradient.
Where does your strength come from? At that point, let's just say you're 200 Ks into it. You're coming up to the end of the toughest ultra on earth, and you've hit the wall numerous times, and you've managed to pull through every time. Physically, there's no question that physically you're in shape, but the true strength, where do you think that comes from? The true strength to keep pushing forward, to not quit, to overcome suffering. Where do you think that comes from?
Well, I don't know. Just the belief, I think. Just the belief in yourself and your body. Like someone said something to me a couple of weeks ago that like your mind will quit 1,000 times before your body does. So that's pretty true. So it's just pushing, just pushing through that mental barrier more than the physical barrier. You know that with, like you said, with the training, if you've put the right training in, you've trained for these things, you train for the hills, you can finish. You can slow down and finish if you want to, but that's not the excuse. If it's sort of hard to explain. You still got to give, but 100% at that time, 100% of your effort at that time. I know you can't run flat out 100% of the effort for 240 Ks because you won't get through it, but you have to find that balance, and yeah, you fight the mental battle. Yes, you can go a bit easier. Yes, you'll still finish. Yes, you're going to get a good time, but are you going to be happy yourself? Is that what you want? That's the battle you have with yourself, I think, in your own mind.
Now, what can you tell us how you felt when you saw the finish line? I've seen footage of people crossing the finish line at Badwater. There's the Badwater 135 finishes tape. The two people holding that up. What do you sort of feel when you see that? You've run 134.5 miles. Over the last. How long did it take? Sort of 24
just
hours.
Under 24, yeah.
Yep. What were you going through when you saw that the finish line? Was it just a relief?
Funnily enough, at Badwater, it is, because it's the longest finish in the world. As you come up, there is a few little switchbacks into the portal on the road, and you think that the finish is closer than it is, but it just seems to go on forever. And this year was no different to last year. I thought I'd sort of had it in my brain. I knew it was going to be not round the next corner. It's this corner after, not round the next corner. It's the corner after that. But by the time of this race, the race this year, sub 24 became the goal. So when we were pushing at the end to get towards the finish and checking the watch, and we were still under the 24-hour mark, and we were going around corner after corner, and we couldn't see the lights of the finish. And then the crew came down and told us we still had another K or so to go, and I looked at the watch, and it was like 23:48 or something like that on the one. It was like, no, we're not going to get this. We're not going to get this 24. But then one corner after another, and we actually did break into a bit of a jog in the last 300, 400 metres. I don't know where it came from. But yeah, that Badwater finish is just, I don't know what anybody else goes through, but yeah, I thought I would cope a bit better than I did in 2015, but it was exactly the same. So just to see that line, yeah, it's the accomplishment, and yeah, I wouldn't say relief. Yeah, it's just it's just what you've been looking for the last 3 hours.
Yeah, or the last sort of 24 hours type thing. Now, if you could give some advice to a listener out there who has dreams of getting to the start line of Badwater, there might be a guy or a girl sort of out there thinking or dreaming, yep, I've got a goal, I want to get to the start line of Badwater. Is there any advice you would give someone with that particular goal?
Go for it. Yeah, that's obviously do your homework, prepare, do the right events, and get your body, mind, and everything prepared for it. Because as well as being a tough race, it's logistically and financially, it's a big investment. It's a big investment for yourself, your family, friends. You want to go, and you want to finish, and you want to do yourself and the race justice. So it's like I've been fortunate to go twice. I don't know if I'll go back. I've achieved what I wanted to do. But yeah, it's my philosophy in life. If you've got the opportunity, life's too short. Go for it, but make sure you're prepared and you do everything possible you can to have the best opportunity while you're there.
Also, just on advice, if you could make a phone call to the 20-year-old Mick Thwaites and give him some advice, what would you tell him?
Probably give up smoking and put all that money away for when you go to Badwater. It's hard because I look back and you think of things like that, and a great piece of advice I got off my father, was never regret the things you've done, regret the things you haven't done. Well, yeah, we all regret things that we've done, but I would say never dwell on those things, about regretting something. So I can't say if I go back looking at my life the way it's panned out, everything happens for a reason, and I probably wouldn't be where I am today running if I hadn't gone through stuff in the 20s and 30s. It's what's made me what I am today. So yeah, obviously we've all had moments in our lives that we're probably not proud of, where we've done things we shouldn't have, or we've hurt people that we shouldn't have done. But I'll just try and live for the future, and try and look after everybody that's around me.
Now, you've mentioned earlier on, you mentioned Buddhism, and you've done, you meditate. What has running taught you about yourself? Whether it's Badwater, both Badwaters, or running for 417 Ks over 48 hours, 24-hour runs, your first marathon. What have you sort of learnt about yourself through running for really long distances? Is there a particular lesson that you've learnt, or is there anything that you can sort of put your finger on that you've learned about yourself?
Probably that I've got the ability to focus on something, and be able to achieve what my focus is, or get as close to it as I can. It's hard to yes, I've learned I've got stamina, I've got some mental ability, I've got some craziness, I don't know. But yeah, I've learned that I can be at one with my mind, or I can have that mindfulness where I can switch off and be in the now and just concentrate on what I can control, and that's all I can do. So I go into these races now with the mindset. Yes, I have goals, I have paces, and I just work towards that. I don't worry about what other people are doing. Maybe, like in like Badwater doesn't become a race against a person. It's a race against the course. It's a race against the time, a race against the clock. Don't get me wrong. If I was 300 meters off the first place with 3Ks to go, then yes, I'd be trying to hunt somebody down. But yeah, I just work on what I can control, and I carry that into my business and my life too. So I can only deal with what I can control, and don't worry about what other people are doing or what other people are thinking.
Have you got anything sort of planned that you're working on next? Do you sort of got another ultra that you sort of got your eyes set on, that you're sort of contemplating or even actively working towards?
Yeah, I'm actually going to New Zealand in 4 or 5 weeks' time to run the New Zealand 24-hour again on the track in Auckland. We have hopefully next year the 24-hour World Championships again in July next year, which are in Belfast, Northern Ireland. So that will be a big focus to hopefully put on the Australian jersey again and go and run over in Belfast next year. And then, yeah, who knows after that. I definitely going to go back for 48, and I've got a 6-day challenge there. That's I don't think it'll be next year, but maybe the year after that. I might work towards the next progression.
Yeah, well, good luck with the future. You've definitely got the mindset and the heart and the courage to get to the start line and even push through. And yeah, you're a real inspiration. Whereabouts can people find you online? Yeah, can you maybe just give a shout out to that?
Yeah, well, we have probably the best place is we've got a website called www.teamschmick.com, and that's just born from my running adventures with good mates of mine. It started with myself and a good mate called Sean Mulholland, and that's where the Schmick comes from, Sean and Mick. So we've got a page that all of our stuff, whether it's Sean's races or Rob's races or whatever we do, we've got a growing group of, it's like a running club now, of probably 20 or so people that have helped crew or done races over the last few years. So all of our sort of adventures and races get noted on there, and it's probably the best place to see it. We just like to have fun, and we all give back to each other when we all do different events. So that's probably the best place to have a look and follow what I do and what the other guys do.
Yeah, cool. All right, well, thanks again for your time, and thanks for coming on to the podcast. It's been fascinating talking with you and finding out about Badwater and hearing, the hearing it from the horse's mouth, if you like. But yeah, good luck with the 24-hour runs coming up, and I look forward to following your progress and your future adventures.
All right, thanks very much for having me on, mate. It's been good.
Okay, cheers. Thanks a lot.
You've just been listening to the Born to Kick Arse podcast at borntokickarse.com. If you liked what you heard and want more, please subscribe on iTunes, give a 5-star rating and a Kick Arse review. This really helps to boost our presence and continues to allow us to introduce you to the most fascinating people on the planet. Welcome aboard, and catch you next time.